Hell, this is Bad Vibes. Today's topic is exes, whether it's ex-friends or ex-lovers. As always, there's a trigger warning with this topic. Also, this video was supposed to be 10 minutes longer, but one of the stories got deleted, so sorry for the shorter video. I hope you still enjoy it. When I was 7 years old, my mom and father got divorced. This event prompted her to move and follow her career in a different small town, which would pay better, as she was now a single parent. On our long 12-hour drive to the new location, we stopped on the way in this little town, which is very hippie, with lots of art and little shops. My mom said that we were going to meet up with her friend Paulette. I guess they went way back in her college days, and recently got in touch after a decade. We end up going to this East Indian restaurant, where we would meet for dinner. This slender, somewhat fragile woman walks in. She was very tall, over 6 feet, big frizzy, curly brown hair with blonde streaks in it. She was Caucasian, wearing a colorful shawl with feather earrings and with very pale blue eyes. She looked like a mosaic tapestry or something. She walks over to the table and gives my mom a big greeting and a big hug, makes her way over to my older brother and shakes his hand. After that, she comes around to my side of the table. I let my hand out to her, and she just stood there, expressionless, with her mouth partly open with a blank gaze, just staring at me. It briefly made me uncomfortable, and then a flick of a switch, this spark ignites in her face. She makes a huge cat smile, kneels over and hugs me tightly. She goes back to sit with my mom and they catch up while we eat dinner. My mom gets the bill and says to her in the parking lot, "You can just follow us." We get in the car and my mom explains to us that she is actually coming over to live with us for a while. She followed us for the next several hours. We get to our new place and unpack our necessities, as we had a moving truck hired for the rest of the stuff, arriving in the morning. There is a bunk bed already set up at this place for me and my brother. It is fairly late into the night, roughly 11 p.m. when we arrived. My brother and I set up sleeping bags. I take the top bunk. My mom says goodnight and I fall asleep pretty quickly. I wake up around 1:30 a.m. I guess the patio deck light got turned on, which was right beside our bedroom. I gazed out the blinders and I could see the back of Paulette's curly hair. She was sitting on the deck, cross-legged, smoking a cigarette. I didn't think much of it and laid back down until I noticed the light from the window gets partially blocked. I look behind me with my head still on the pillow. I see the unmistakable outline of Paulette's shadow facing my window. She was there for a few minutes. I didn't want to lean up, I just pretended to sleep. Her shadow moves and I hear the front door close. The patio light turns off after a few minutes. I reposition myself facing the wall to go back to sleep. As I begin to drift off, the door in my room opens, slowly, and I quickly turn my head around. It wasn't my mom, it was Paulette wearing a nightgown. I turn back to face the wall and close my eyes. She gently makes her way to my bunk. I feel her fingers in claw formation start to comb the back of my hair, running her nails on the back of my scalp. I keep my eyes closed tightly, nearly holding my breath, trying not to give a sign that I'm awake. I smell some essential oils, like lavender, and she starts rubbing oil on the back of my neck and pinching the back of my neck muscles, sometimes holding it and releasing. I began to kind of accept what's happening because it didn't feel all that bad after a while. I actually ended up falling asleep after my initial confusion. I wake up in the morning. My mom is off at work and Paulette is waiting at the table with cereal for me and my brother. She puts some chocolate chips in my bowl and not my brother's. My brother and I make small talk. She was very giggly and seemed to be trying to make us feel comfortable with the new situation. My brother heads back to his room to set up his GameCube after his cereal. I was a slower eater than my brother, so I always was the last at the table. As slowly as I ate, she was sitting there watching my every move. Once I finished, I said, "Thank you," and grabbed my bowl to bring it to the sink. She places her hand on mine and says, I gave you a neck massage so you wouldn't pee your bed. I know a lot of younger ones pee their bed when they sleep in unfamiliar surroundings. I looked up at her and said, I've never peed my bed before, but thank you. She continued to massage the back of my neck for the next few nights. I ended up telling her that I'm comfortable here and there's no need for you to do this anymore. She reacted to that with a sigh, but acknowledged it. I started elementary school the following week, which meant going to bed earlier, around 8 p.m. Her and my mom would stay up much later than my brother and I to drink wine. I always waited for them to go to bed before I used the washroom at night to go pee, because my mom would kind of scold me for being up so late on weeknights. Once things got quiet around 11, I'd sneak out and tippy-toe to the washroom. This was my ritual for the next few weeks, until Paulette started doing the same exact thing at the same time, every time. Every night when I used the washroom, it just so happened that Paulette needed to use it too, and she would blaze down the hallway across my room. When I opened my door, I'd go back into my room and wait for her. It started happening so frequently that I would just go outside to pee from the back mudroom door. This started to piss me off, no pun intended. I'd open my door as quietly as I could and then sprint to the washroom. This seemed to be effective for a while. One night, I get up slightly later than usual, around midnight. I was a little more careless with the noise because I was half asleep. I open the door and Paulette's door opens instantly. She barges out into the dimly moonlit hallway, completely naked, and starts walking quickly down the hallway. I was already so far down the hallway, I couldn't turn back to my room. I jumped behind my mom's jade plant and squished my knees to my chest and tucked my head down. She whizzes straight by me, so fast I felt the wind push my hair. She stays in the washroom for almost an hour, with the door opened a crack, lights off, in silence. I stayed there beside the washroom, tucked in the corner beside the plant, not making a sound. I hear the washroom door open completely, and she starts pacing up and down the hallway. I kept small behind the plant until she goes back into her room. I brushed this off as a complete accident. It was just unfortunate timing. But now, every night going forward, she would literally sprint down the hall, naked, if I made a single noise, creak the floorboard, or open my door. About 2 months into this, my brother and I were sword fighting with tree branches outside. He ends up clipping my forehead, causing it to bleed pretty bad. Paulette sees it happen. She walks up to my brother for what I thought would be to scold him. But no, she stomp kicks him in the head with her boot, causing him to fall back on his back. He gets up off the ground crying and runs into the house. She grabs me and starts cradling me, rocking me back and forth. She's shaking so much that she's vibrating, repeatedly asking me, "Are you hurt?" in a shaky voice. Anyway, my mom finds out through my brother what happened and decides that she needs to leave. Her final day, she made a point to see me one-on-one in the driveway before entering her car. She knelt down and said, "I hope I can see you in a different life. You remind me so much of my husband. Goodbye," and starts bawling her eyes out, hugging me. I asked my mother who her husband was. I guess he was a Marine who died in Afghanistan a few months prior to her moving in with us. My mom said she would frequently say how much I reminded her of him on a daily basis. My mom hasn't spoke to her since. I never told my mom about the massages or anything to this day, as she was already exiled, and I felt that it would just cause more drama. My best friend and I grew up in a sleepy wannabe New Jersey Central Florida town and were outcasts. We met in 6th grade when I overheard her talking to another classmate about bionicles, my 11-year-old self's passion. We became fast friends and soon were inseparable. Soon began the gauntlets of sleepovers, birthday parties, and family gatherings. We were practically siblings. She was the first person I came out to as bisexual, as in turn I was the first person she told about being trans. Her home life was tumultuous, though I can't say mine was any better. We often had a habit of taking refuge at each other's houses. Like I said, we became like siblings. Her father was an alcoholic, strict, and prone to physical discipline. Her sister was a stuck-up girl who soon gravitated towards the hicks and jocks when we entered high school, and her mother was a pseudo-vegan hippie love child held over from the 80s. When I was 23 and she was 22 at the time, we had another long night sleepover in order to let her escape yet another fight with her mother. She had recently lost her job at Walmart, and I was going into my first shift at Taco Bell the next day. On the drive home the next morning, she excitedly told me that since she now has her own car, she would be applying to pizza places that were in need for a driver. I was proud. It was the first time she had hunted a job on her own, as I'd usually been the one to coax her into applying where I was working. Not that she ever lasted very long. My first day of training goes quite well. My coworkers are friendly and try to get me to talk more. My manager likes to playfully embarrass me by trying to get me to talk hood to the other coworkers. Being a training day, it wasn't a very long shift, but I had been up pretty early in anticipation, and this was my first day on the job in a few months. I got home around noon and informed some of my internet friends that my first day went well, and around 5 p.m. I start to go to bed, drained from a good day. As I'm preparing to lay in my bed, I get a Steam message. Her lamenting another fight with her mother, asking if she could come over. Now, I had started to grow a bit weary of their fights on their end. I began to repair my relationship with my family and a few friends, and I had given her advice many times on how to better approach things. In my infinite wisdom and eagerness to sleep, I left the message unread and drifted off to slumber. Around 8 p.m., I am awakened by her bursting into my room in panic. Having just been ripped from a dream, I am groggy and disoriented. I drag myself into the bathroom to relieve my bladder and come back to my room to find her rocking back and forth on my bed. It is at this time that I notice that she's covered in blood, so I ask her what happened. She informs me that she just saw someone murder her mother with a knife. My mind goes blank. In the deepest part of my mind, alarm bells are ringing. Isn't the rocking back and forth a little bit overdramatic? Why didn't she call the police? But this is my best friend. I've known her for over a decade, and we were the only two people in the world we could count on. I suppress these feelings and go to inform my sister and stepfather. My mother had passed away a year prior, and it was roughly a month to the anniversary of her death. We were all in a dark place, antisocial as always. It was the only way we knew how to handle emotional issues. When I informed my family, they immediately go to the same place I did, though they were far more vocal about it. I offer excuses I know myself were flimsy and return to my room, phone in hand. I convinced her to call the police, and I can hear the explanation and details over the phone. A man in a black ski mask. When the cops arrive, she swears up and down that it was most likely her father. They send cars over to check the crime scene and take her statement. I ride with her in back of the cop car over to the sheriff's office. It gets to be around 2 a.m. Her sister was brought in, as was her father. I have work the next morning and request to be taken home by an officer. It takes me a while to get to sleep. The next day at work, I'm quiet until my manager asks me what has happened. I inform him, but decide to work the rest of my training shift. When I get home, my sister informs me that she had confessed. Her mom had threatened to kick her out for not being able to find a job, and she, enraged, had taken a kitchen knife and stabbed her repeatedly. My mind froze like a bad computer, and I turned my face to the monitor. I was in a Discord call at the time, and all I could weakly say was, my best friend just confessed to murdering her mother, before hanging up and laying down on my bed. Her trial started on the 7th of this month. I don't know the results, though my grandmother tells me that she took a plea deal for life in prison rather than the death penalty. Part of me wants to contest that, to demand that they take the death penalty for ridding this earth of such a peaceful and caring woman. A larger part of me was just glad that she was being punished. Natalie, you were my best friend, my sister, my platonic soulmate. But please, let's never meet again. I'll start with some brief context. I lived with an abusive male partner who didn't value my safety whatsoever. He would get really mad if I didn't leave the door unlocked, and we lived in a not so great part of town. He was way older than me. I was barely 18 at the time, and he was 26. Neither of us owned a car. He worked at a Waffle House, and I was getting sick constantly, so keeping a job wasn't easy for me. He liked drugs and alcohol, and he traumatized me in regards to both, blamed me for his usage, and would assault me while on it. When I finally got the courage to leave for the last time, I did it while he was at work. I begged my mom to help me get my necessities, stuff with emotional value, and some clothes. Instead, she called the cops. There was a warrant out for his arrest, and she got a police escort just in case. As soon as he got out, he immediately started messaging me from different new numbers, threatening to murder me and my family if I didn't go home with him. It didn't matter how much I blocked him, he kept at it. I was scared, but I thought for the most part I was safe. After all, he didn't have a car. I was wrong. About a week into this, he and his gun-owning friend showed up. He banged on the door and was screaming. His friend owning a gun is important because he repeatedly said that he and said friend would shoot us. My window was on the second floor facing the street, and my stomach dropped when he saw me. I immediately dropped and army crawled to my little brother's room and hid in the closet. His window was facing the backyard. I guess my monkey brain felt safer there. I was the only one home and was scared that if I breathed too loud, he would hear me. I was terrified. I didn't want to call the police because I thought that he would hear that too, so I silently texted my mom. The police arrived about 20 minutes after my mom said that they were on their way. He and his friend were taken into custody after the same friend had gotten him out on bond. Friend did have a gun. He didn't. Bottom line, I was able to get a restraining order. I am strictly sober and definitely in therapy after that. This is my first Reddit post, and it's going to be heavy. It contains mention of physical and mental abuse, so this is a trigger warning for everyone. I'm an 18-year-old female. I met my ex, male, 22, in February of 2020, but didn't end up dating him until I was closer to my 17th birthday because he still lived with his girlfriend. He told me that they were just friends, and he didn't like her like that. And I didn't find out till later that they were actually still doing things together, and meeting him was the biggest mistake of my life. Everything started off great, as every relationship goes. I sent pics because he was my boyfriend, so you know. And of course, I let him save them for later use. Another big mistake. I noticed that they were still texting and went through his phone, and he was saying that he still loved her and missed her. I was deeply hurt and called him out on it. He apologized and said that it would never happen again. I told him to text her that we were dating, and he did. She was pissed. She stopped paying for the house and helping him pay his car payments, and at this time he had quit his job at Taco Bell and refused to do his new job Ubering because I need to practice League of Legends because I want to be a pro league streamer. So I worked my ass off and ended up losing my job because the manager didn't let me work without a doctor's note, so I was stuck working his job while he played games. Before I met him, I had $4,000 in my savings. He ended up using my card to pay his phone bills, car payments, the apartment, daily weed, fast food, new league accounts, and fucking CSGO knives. He kept losing his accounts due to telling people to off themselves and using F and N slurs, but the worst was yet to happen. I found out that he was using an old tablet to excessively watch porn, set up dating accounts, and have different Instagram accounts. But on these accounts, he was pretending to be a woman. I called him out on this and told him I wanted to leave. He freaks out, jumping around and screaming and crying, saying that he would change, and I trusted him. As time went on, things got worse, and I was scared to leave, and by the end of this, you'll see why. He had shoved me into the wall and got into my face screaming, "You stole my car keys because you don't want me to work, because you're jealous of other girls." which was stupid because he had thrown his keys at me during a different argument. But one day I went through his iPad and found that he was actively not just sending, but selling my pictures from when I was 16 and 17, and he was doing the same with his other ex. I started to try to get my stuff together and put Gorilla Glue in his charging port to get rid of that filth I just saw. When he found out that it no longer charged, he was livid. He started screaming and getting in my face. I tried to go around him and grab my things, but when my back was turned, he pulled me down to the ground, wrestled me until he was able to put me in a chokehold. I was sobbing and just accepting that this was going to be the end. But before I blacked out, he let me go, and I started gasping for air and gagging from the excessive coughing. He just stood over me and laughed at me. I tried to crawl away, but he grabbed my leg and started dragging me out of the apartment. I kicked, trying to get him off of me, which just made him pull me like a dog playing tug of war. He eventually dragged me out, keeping my wallet, keys, and all my valuables, so I just sat there begging for my stuff so I could leave and just go home. He came outside and pulled me down the apartment stairs by my leg, and I was left with extreme bruising and some cuts. I did end up calling the police, but they did absolutely nothing. Fast forward, he had to move because he had nowhere to stay or live after being evicted from the apartment, and I had gotten a new job. One day it was particularly cold, and I went to get a shirt out of my car, and there he was. He was sitting in my car on his phone. I had left my door unlocked because I work in a good area. I'd called him a cheater and told him to leave. He got out of the car and was starting to go around the back, so I jumped in and tried to lock the door from the back seat. He ran over and pulled the door open and started trying to pull me out of the car. I started screaming and kicking him. Thankfully, a customer saw this happening and called the police. They arrested him and told me to go home for the night, which they ended up firing me for. Unfortunately, he got bailed out, and while he was in jail, he had given out my phone number to other people there. He walked 4.5 hours to my house after he was released, and he was looking around my backyard when my neighbor saw him and called my dad. My dad got in his truck with his gun and waited for him to come out of the gas station. He eventually did, but ran off. He harassed me, saying that he was going to show up to my graduation and ruin everything, and has gotten to the point of making multiple fake accounts on Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok pretending to be me and his other ex. And as of today, January 1st, 2023, he still pretends to be high school girls selling our pictures and making fake accounts. I'm a 35-year-old female. My ex-friend, 36 male, let's call him Will. I met him early in middle school through a mutual friend. I always kind of got a feeling that he liked me, but we were never super close, and he never made any kind of actions, so I let it go. Fast forward to a few years ago, we bonded over our love of watching professional hockey games. I moved to the city for college, and he remained in our hometown 4 hours away. In the meantime, he married a very nice woman who I've met a few times, and even brought her to the city for one of our periodic visits. Sometimes in the summer, we would go to baseball games. One year, we traveled to a neighboring city to go to a on-the-road hockey game. The city was 2 hours from my house, so we came there. We drove, watched the game, saw the sights, and drove back to my house later that night. He crashed on my couch and left the next morning. Here's where it takes a turn. I let Will know that I could take over driving if he ever got tired. He later told me that there was a couple times where it got dicey out there, but he didn't say anything at the time and drove the whole way. He also tailgated constantly. Needless to say, I felt unsafe in his car. A few days later, I posted a pot of chili I made on Instagram. He told me through 3 different mediums, Facebook, Insta, and text, that he would love to come over for dinner and could be there ASAP. Keep in mind, it's a 4-hour drive between our houses. That coupled with the fact that I knew he was having marital problems. His wife had been in a traumatic car accident before they met, and she was still struggling with health issues, so sometimes she can't fully engage, and that I've always had a feeling that he liked me, made me uncomfortable enough to ask for some space. Surprise, surprise, he didn't respect my boundary. I posted on Facebook warning our friends about his behavior and blocked him, told him not to text or contact me again. I have since moved and he has no idea where I live. I made it clear to friends not to tell him, and they've all understood and said that they've noticed some erratic behavior from him. Fast forward another few years. Out of the blue, he tags me in a year in review post in which he took a photo of him burning the book I wrote from a brand new username that I never known about, thus I didn't have blocked. I blocked this one and posted another message to my friends who offered a lot of great help and advice. Since he hasn't made over or overt threats or physically stalked me, I can't legally do anything. But joke's on him, he already paid me for the book, and hundreds of the physical copies still live in the world, as well as the master docs on mine and my publisher's computers.